need. And you I think have gone ahead in understanding what women need. Okay, so this is going to be like in 3 sessions, 3 parts, where we talk about, first of all, how we optimize fitness, for food, that's nutrition. And then I'd like you to speak to women over 40, because really that's where whatever mistakes we do, yeah, that's when it really begins to show up. And whatever preparation we've had, that's when it begins to like turn up for us. So, but before we go into all of that, I'd like to just introduce you, D. Well, I call you D, but you're Denise Mago. Okay.
Yeah.
And and you empower rebel women to reclaim their energy. I love that. Okay. And vitality and metabolic balance, helping them feel amazing in their bodies. Through the D5 system, you provide holistic support for better sleep, physical health, mental well-being, spiritual growth, and nutrition, all in one transformative approach. The benefits of the D5 holistic system are sustainable weight loss, nervous system balance, body fat reduction, increased energy levels, and enhanced agility and mobility. We're going to go into all of that deep, but if I'm going to introduce you, I'm going to tell you what I've experienced with you, right? I'm going to tell you and how that has worked for me. Because I remember that sometime last year, I was like, what's going on? I have cellulite, I have this, I'm adding on weight where I shouldn't. And I just reached out to you, and then we had this conversation. And yeah, I was surprised, first of all, that you actually said, no, 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 no. Before we start the exercise, we have to know the state of your health, right? And so we had to know that we had to do that assessment. And we did that assessment and was like, okay, these are some of the issues that you have. And on the basis of that, we now proceeded with, the work that we did for some months. And then that went on. That included what I was even going to drink, what I was going to eat, how I was going to eat it. I mean, that was really eye-opening for me, because then some things changed fundamentally for me, right? So this is me introducing D Mago, right? Because for those who are going to listen to this is me introducing D Mago based on the experience that I've had with what she does and the team at the Wellness Hub. So that was what happened. Right. And then even to how you engage your core, or when you stand, when you walk, I've never forgotten that. And guess what? I teach people wherever I'm going, like, oh, stand like this, oh, engage your core. My 10-year-old son was the first person that was like the butt of that experiment, like, okay, engage your core engage, and that really changed some things fundamentally for me. And I really want to thank you for that, because you were so open and you walked with me. You started where I was and you moved me forward, period. So that's what we're talking about today. I felt a lot of women may not know this, and I work with women. I work with women, and I know that this is something that when they understand and know, would also help to improve and enhance their quality of life, which is what we're about, really. Because at the Bra Girl, we are about enhancing body confidence, improving the quality of life, increasing productivity, and through the different phases of life. So that is what we're talking about today. So Dee, I'd like you to tell a bit more about yourself. I've told a bit about you that I know, that I love, and I love your effervescent personality, right? How you come into the room and you brighten it up. I remember when I would say, oh, I'm so tired today, I'll be like, maybe Dee will let me go and not let me do this workout this morning. But then she's putting me on the bicycle. So anyway, so Dee, I'll hand this over to you to just give us an introduction about yourself, what you'd like people to know about you and what you do, and then we'll take it on from there. Thank you
Yeah.
for meeting with me today.
Well, thank you. And honestly, I like to hear what you said, because something that is interesting about the work I do is that I rarely hear what are the fundamental changes that people make after they work with me. So hearing you, to me, it tells me I'm on the right path. So that is good. It's a good validation. And I think what I want to start with, it's I want to go a little bit back in history, my history, because the foundation of what I do and how I do it goes back to that. So there was a time in my life where I have little kids, right? At that point, I was married with my first husband. We were still new in Canada, and then I have three kids. But as they keep showing up in my life, right, life becomes more challenging when it comes to time. And I think, and this is the first thing I want to mention is time, because a lot of people complain about not having time to do certain things that they know are important for them, right?
Mhm.
But they, no matter, but even though that they know, they still compromise that. And this is the tricky part. So, as I said, going back in time, so that was the first thing for me is that I know I have little kids now. I'm not going to get any younger. So, what are the things that I can do to help me be the grandmother, the active grandmother that I will be one day? So that was my vision. Where am I heading? Even though that my kids were little, we're in teenagers. We're not even thinking about being married. But that was my vision. It's like, how can I be that grandmother? And I think, but in the time where I had a full-time job, right? I always being a social person, I will never compromise my social life, period, because that is what it feeds my soul, being with people. There are people that are introverts. I am the extrovert. I'm the outgoing. I need to be social. If I'm not social, I'm miserable. So these are all the different things that I needed to consider and see what grandmother I was going to be. And as
Mm.
my kids were little. So one of the things that I find out is that for me, this is another thing I want to share, is that during my pregnancies, I was still very active before, during, and after. And I find out that coming out of that phase of having the baby, they were all natural delivery and all that kind of stuff. I was very lucky. My deliveries were like I was popping up, a candy, which I know is not the case for a lot of women, unfortunately.
Mm.
And but I will always wonder what is the difference between me and other women that have difficult pregnancies. And I think, and that is a foundation. I was active. I wasn't active in the way I am today. I didn't even have the knowledge I have today, but I was active in with the knowledge I had at that point in time. My oldest daughter is 23 now. So I want you to have put that in time perspective as well, okay? So I was a more active. I wasn't the person that was eating out on regular basis. I was cooking at home, very traditional in a way that I was bringing all my Venezuelan way of eating, and I was social, which is also goes back to community, which we know now that is more important than even exercise itself, right? And that's where it started to for me to start making sense when I was trying to compare myself with other friends that were having difficult pregnancies. And that is the foundation. So then when it came after is how can I work out in a way that it keeps me active to be that grandmother I want to be, but in an efficient way because I don't have a lot of time. Like at that point, I was working at 6:30 in the morning in downtown. So imagine that. So by the time I was finishing work, I have to rush home to get my oldest daughter at that time from the bus stop, the school bus, right? And then after that, many of you that are mothers, you know what's next. Well, you have to feed the baby, you have to clean the house, you have to, the endless list of stuff, starts. But the question was always, how can I integrate exercise? That was my view at that point, in exercise in my lifestyle. And that was the beginning of what you experience today, right? It's like the exercises have to be efficient and it have to integrate the key components that now that you and I are in our 40s are really important for us, right? And that's why I'm bringing history into this whole thing, because 20 years ago I was in my 20s, so I wasn't even thinking about hormones, about menopause, perimenopause, none of that stuff. This is a time in my life where I could pop babies and I will go back in shape like no other. But I knew somewhere deep inside of me that that wasn't going to be the case forever. And that was the thoughts that were coming in my mind, to consider that Venezuelans are all about vanity. And I was like, I don't want to be, and people, please don't take it personally, but I don't want to be this fat old lady, right? That it's suffering from knee and back pain and cannot even enjoy my grandchildren, going back to that vision, right? So, and it's simply because it's that Venezuelan vanity. And I know Africa have the same thing. So this is the foundation, right? Because we all need a vision. We all need to know, how is that future life looking like for you? And all of us, without exception, without where we come from, we have seen our parents or grandparents, in my case, even great grandmother, right, going downhill in a way that they became dependent on us. I don't know if that will be different for us, because it will depend on the choices that we make today in our 40s and in our 30s and in our 20s, of course. But because we're not there, we're going to start taking action right now in our 40s. So,
Yes, for sure.
right? So
Yes.
there's something special about our 40s. That is the time where we start experiencing something and we don't know what that is. But we know that all the things that you were eating before, now we're going to start jumping into nutrition, right? So I'm going to give you hints and keys of everything that is what is today, what the holistic program I put together. So because as we got into our 40s, we know that that pizza that you used to have once a week or twice a week is not serving you anymore. You know it is making you bloated. You know your weight is changing and it's not going back as quickly as it used to be when you just make like a small changes. Oh, I'm just drinking more water, right? When you're finding even your mood might start changing, right? But I think the biggest thing for us women that we start noticing is weight. We start finding out that even if you're doing the same things that you were doing in your 30s are not longer working. And you see the number on the scale, which is the one thing that we can track, because it's all about tracking, right? Whether, because this new thing is like, I don't weight myself because that number on the scale doesn't mean anything. Yes, it means a lot because it's about tracking. It's not about shame. It's not about making you feel guilty. It is a number that it tells you where you're heading. And if that number is increasing, even the number of the clothing size that you're wearing, that is still a number, right? You know something, because if you haven't changed anything fundamentally in your lifestyle, but those numbers are changing, whether the number on the scale, on the size of your clothing, right? There's something. And that's always the question, is like, what the heck is happening? Right? And that's when we women start starving ourselves, because we think the solution is in eating less, right? Um, Even though that you're still eating the same. So you're eating less. Because the other thing I hear a lot from women when it comes to nutrition is, but I eat quite healthy. And I question that inside of me. I don't always voice it, but I always question it. And which is why I always ask questions, right? What is healthy eating for you? Because it also goes with culture, right? So my husband told me, it's like, for him, eating healthy is just, it might be cooking mac and cheese, right? Because it's not eating out, right? So it's all about perspective, and it's all about your upbringing, um, and of course your culture, because they all have an influence in our life, whether we like it or not. And then Canada is a very diverse country, which is where you and I are. And culture, it is something super important to consider, because I'm gonna step into something else, and you interrupt me if I'm talking too much, okay? So culture, it plays a big role, not only because of where we come from, but also our genetics. So, and the way how we eat culturally, it really, it's a lot in tune with who we are genetically. But at the same time, we're living in a country, for us immigrants, for example, that is not our environment. We, in my personal case, for example, and I know in yours too, we're not used to having 4 seasons. We have two, maybe hot and rain. That's as far as it goes. So we're most likely coming from a place where daylight is about 12 hours, probably from 6 or 8 in the morning to 6 or 7 p.m. And that's it. That's all year round. The shortest day goes from basically maybe gets dark at 6 p.m. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because that is in relationship to the circadian rhythm, which is also something very important to consider. For some of you that don't know what circadian rhythm is, it is our biological clock based on 24 hours. Traditional Chinese medicine use that, and they combine that with the organs as well. A lot of the studies and research done now when it comes to biohacking and longevity, are starting to consider the circadian rhythm more. And we all have a rhythm. And bringing this into spirituality is it's the law of, rhythm. There is always something, there's cycles into everything.
Mm-hmm.
And for us women, taking consideration the cosmic laws, all these new scientific findings, right, that the Chinese knew for a very long time, right, is that we get into the cycles, and as women can see it more than men. And
Mm.
I'm gonna speak now into the importance of that. Is that women, we have 20 to 38 days cycles. Men have 24-hour cycle. So the tendency is that, and going back to what has been happening in the fitness industry and nutrition industry, is that as women have we always been treated like men. all the research is being done in men based on their 24-hour cycle. And we do
Mm.
not function like that. So as I was saying, like if I go back in history, when I was looking to be the future grandmother and start working towards that, right? It's about also understanding that our cycles have an influence in this progression of being a grandmother, for example.
So let me just cut in there before you go on, and let's summarize this part first. I hear you when you talk about the big changes that happen when we get to 40. And you've talked about the factors around that. You talked about cultural eating. I'm glad that you recognize that, because I know that for me, for instance, as an African, I've eaten in a certain way. I've lived in a certain climate. I'm used to a
Mhm.
certain way of that. In fact, my DNA has, been adapted in a certain way by the reason of that. And so coming into a new place, I'm finding out that things are so different. For me, the snow was something I had to like get used to. Like the snow was something like, oh God, it took me years, right? And then the food that we eat as well is different. I began to wonder, because that was where the questions started coming up for me, that am I eating the way I should eat. And I found that the things that, they were up for eating, I found them a bit confusing, because I could get to the store and there are four different variations of the same thing. And you find me actually standing in the store. I'm like, okay, what's the difference? And all of that. Even at that, I wasn't sure I was even looking for the right things, right? In terms of not just the calories, but what was contained inside those things. But by and large, I realized that cultural eating, like you said, is something that we all need to consider, right? And I'd like you to speak more into that, because now we're going into cycles, which is also a thing. Because I knew that I did intermittent fasting, and that was tied to the cycle, my cycle as a woman, and I don't think that's a very common information. But I want us to just feed into that cultural eating, because as you have said, we have different cultures, like different races and backgrounds coming together in Canada. And when we are approaching things like over 40 issues or even weight loss, we probably shouldn't be approaching it in a one size fits all format. You see what I mean? So I'd like you to speak a bit into that, and then we'll go into the circadian readings and cycles.
So one of the things that I'm finding, and this is where my personal search started, is because I at some point I am the kind of person that when I go, I'm on a mission, I'm the extremist. I go into the extreme, I go full on to try it on and see what's happening. So in that search, what I got myself into, and this is again, I'm giving you history so you have the context, right? So I went into the extreme of being vegetarian, and then I started exploring being vegan. My body was feeling the best. But what I find out now going into my tropical body, being in this freaking cold country, is that I was not doing well in winter. And that was my first key. And I'm like, why is that is minus 30 for people that are not in Canada? Yes, it is something that we experience. And I'm in minus 30. I have my coat and everything, and I'm going inside my house, and I still have to wear my coat for about 30 minutes more because I was frozen inside. And I started doing more research. And what I was finding is, yes, my body does very well as a vegetarian because of my genetics, right? Where I come from. I'm not, it's my tropical body does very well as a vegetarian, but it doesn't very well in Canada because being vegetarian suits very well in a very hot country because it cools your body. And this is about to start understanding not only our culture or genetics, but also our environment, which is also going to influence the way how we exercise, by the way, because it's not only about our hormone cycles, but it's also about understanding the season and the year that we're experiencing, because it's also going to influence our energy levels and how we want to exercise, whether it's indoors or outdoors, because it will, whether we like it or not, it is going to influence even the way how we exercise.
Mm.
So, so that was for me a big eye opener without understanding anything about nutrition, and that what has got me into looking more into the rhythms, right? Understanding the seasons, understanding how the cycles work, right? And what I came to terms with after doing my own personal research and talking to different people that I'm surrounded with that are very knowledgeable in this area is that number one, I have to eat not only according to my cycle, my 28-day cycle, but I also need to eat according to the environmental cycle, because
Mm.
that is what is going to help me manage. In our case, which could be the most challenging, and I know it's also challenging even for Canadians themselves, is the winter, because it gets very cold. The days are shorter, which we know the lack of vitamin D, it actually influences depression, right?
Mm. So it's
So
not just
it
that you're
also,
having a bad day, is that you probably are lacking vitamin D you're not getting enough of that. So yeah.
exactly, which is some deficiencies that people like us that live in a country like Canada or Alaska, right? Or Norway, Finland, all those countries like ours, that's something that we need to consider because we go through this times during the year that we're lacking of sunlight. Because so number one, the days are shorter, and number two, we're really not outdoors as we would be during summer. But this is the one thing that we need to consider, that no matter what our our seasons are, right now, the lifestyle, no matter where you are in the world, we're spending a lot of time indoors, unfortunately.
Mm.
So we're still lacking of vitamin D. Like
Okay.
a lot of, I was in Mexico last week, and there is a lot of people from the US and Canada. And you know what? I rarely even saw people walking on the street. There's still people like sometimes we're like, I wish I would be in a warmer country, right? And even people in a warmer country right now in our global culture today, they rarely walk. So which means that they're rarely exposed to the sun, because if you're in the car, you're not exposed to the sunlight the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many things, and we're going sideways on this, but because there's a lot of things that we have been told over the years is that sunlight causes cancer, and we need to start, changing that mindset. That might be for another conversation, but I just want to plant the seeds. It's not about being
Mm-hmm.
afraid of the sunlight, right? It is all the toxins that we're surrounded with. And that might be a conversation for another day, because that is gonna get us in a whole toxins, detoxing, and all that kind of stuff, right? But we don't want to get into that right now.
Yes, and we will go there, Dee, in another conversation, really, because
Yes.
that's also another thing that not only prevents us from, say, losing weight when we want to, but also responsible for the illnesses that we
Yes.
attribute to something else. Like if you can take care of yourself in this way, detox the right way for your own body,
Yeah,
within the context of your own environment, then you live better. So thank
yeah,
you. We're going to go to that later. But yes, let's go back
yeah,
to now. So what are the three things, if you could summarize this, what are the three things that women should keep in mind in optimizing their health right here, right now? I have never heard of what you said before about the environmental cycle. I just knew that when it's winter, it's like my brain just goes into hibernation
yes,
mode.
yes,
I
yes,
just don't like
yes,
winter. And
yes.
I was like, okay, maybe it's me not adapting so well. Maybe I need some time. But I mean, I've spent some years and I know that when it's whatever I don't get done in summer, I probably won't get it done in the winter.
Yeah,
So it began to make me think of, okay, whatever schedule I had planned in summer, my schedule has to necessarily be different in the winter so that it reflects whatever I can do. So in winter, for instance, may not be the time I want to create so many things. It may be the time for capacity building and all of that. But now that you say that, that just validates that for me because I'm always like, what is it with this winter? I've been in it for so long, I don't like it.
yeah. So at the macro level, okay, so we should be eating according to the season, right? So when it comes to winter time, we need to eat and we need to consider how the native used to eat back in the days because they were very in tune with the seasons and the cycles of the season. Okay, that's a macro level where we're looking at during winter, we need to eat more bone broth. We want to eat more root vegetables. We want to eat this warming food that when you eat it, you're like, oh my God, I feel like my grandma made this because
Mm.
it's very nurturing. I feel that my mom made this food, right? And because it's
Comfort
very
food.
nurturing. Comfort food. But there's a difference between comfort food and nurturing food in the concept that we know today. Because comfort food, you just go for fast food and it makes you comfortable for 5 minutes. But the nurturing food is more about really nurturing your soul, right? In a very deep level. Because comfort food has become more like fast food kind of concept, right?
Okay. I thought
So
comfort food was soups, for instance.
yeah,
You
no,
know,
I get it, but it's also becoming that thing that is just give you comfort for 30 seconds. And then after that, you feel bloated and miserable.
I got it. I
But
got it.
it's more about, this food that is truly nurturing you. There's so many things that we need to break when it comes to beliefs, right? But I will talk about sacrifices later and the concept of um, like a sacrifice for many people. But let's talk. So we go back to
Yeah.
wheat, we eat all that stuff. So what happens when it comes to workouts as well? This is a
So
time.
so let me just stop you there. You talk about macro level, we should eat according to the season. At
Yes,
micro level, what should that be for us? Because you talk about for instance about your tropical body, how to adapt that in the cold and
for
all of
for
that.
us,
So
yeah,
micro.
in my experience, that's what it is. That's where we need to become a carnivore, basically, during the winter season. It's all about meats, root vegetables, bone broth, very warming food, and all that kind of stuff. So even for us, because that's what is going to help us stay warm, like inside in our body, right?
Myths.
And it helps us to cope better with the environment. In your case and my case, that's the time that we need to actually increase massively the doses of vitamin D
Mhm.
because that is what's going to influence your energy level and mindset, thoughts, and all that kind of stuff. I know there's some because this is why nutrition is so confusing because we're starting to have more findings about um, what is good, what is not good, what is good for men, what is good for women. Things right now in that world, it is very, it can be very messy when it comes to what is the right thing for us. And this is also when I would like you guys that are listening to this to start getting in tune with your intuition. Because I can be saying anything and everything, but you need to understand also that your body will speak to you and will tell you if that is right or not. And it will show up in symptoms because you will experience it in your energy, you will experience it in your sleep, you will experience it in your weight. So you also need to understand that it's not what I'm saying is a godly word, right? It's just
Mm.
that you need to also be in tune with yourself and say, what is happening? So if I'm doing the right things and I'm still feeling miserable, with low energy, weight gain, bloated, you know, lack of
Lack of sleep.
focus or lack of sleep. What's happening? And then that's when we need to start figuring out. So that's something different, right? We need to find out. I'm giving you the perfect environment if you're in the perfect health,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that's not the case for 60% of our population nowadays, at least 60. I know it's more, but the stats are around 60, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I
this is,
love that.
yeah. So then we go through spring, and that's when we start waking up. It's like the flowers. We're not different than the nature, right? And then it comes winter, like a spring, and then you're like, the
Hmm.
days are longer, the snow start melting, right? You start seeing more green outside, and it's this life start coming out of you, and you're like, oh my God, now you mentally start preparing for summer. This is a time that food also, you will start bringing more of this food that the farmers have been working on for so long because they
Mm-hmm.
start harvesting and all that kind of stuff. And now
Mm-hmm.
you start seeing the change in the grocery store of your food. Slightly, not so much anymore, but slightly, just to see that the cost of some fruits is start decreasing, right? Because now we start producing more things in Canada. You are able to see more diversity in fruits and vegetables as well. But that's all the result of the changing season. And that tells you, that is a sign that tells you, oh, now I can start changing my eating, bringing more fruits into my life, right? Bringing more color into my life because the environment is telling you there are more greens. You can even bring more greens into your life. Just start looking out through the window and say, okay, what are the things that I should be, connecting with? And then you start connecting with more colorful things on your plate.
Mm.
So then we jump into, and that's when we start bringing more of an intense workout as well. During winter, your workouts should be, I would suggest more in tune with building muscle. So they can be short, they can be efficient, right? You can do short cardio exercises every day. That's good for your heart and everything, and it keeps that energy going. But you're basically really, really focusing. And this is the macro. Then we're going to start jumping into your 28-day cycle. So then you're going to start looking into your building muscle because you want to show up in summer. That's why you're working so hard on your muscles during winter and spring, right?
So weights,
So
that means also using weights, right, for your workout?
always, so depends because you can use weight, but ultimately it's strength training is not just about weight because now it's breaking the belief that you need to have weight. It's also about how you do the exercises.
Okay.
And that's some of the key elements when it comes to fitness. It's about understanding exactly how you tailor your workouts. And that's the kind of things that over the years I find out that it creates a massive influence on our muscle building. It's not just about lifting heavy weights, because that brings another conversation, which you cannot lift heavy weights if you really have a bad posture. So you need to understand. So there are different aspects, right? But basically, when it comes to strength training, is it's about, for us women, what it's been working very, very well is that we do um, short workouts once a week when it comes to strength training. So you're working all the muscles of your body, and then you have the next 6 days to recover. So there, it is very intense, very short. So we're breaking that uh, fitness belief that you have to work out one muscle a day. So you're giving, and that goes back to also our lifestyle, being efficient with our time, not having enough time, right? So you really have to be also very, very efficient with your workouts.
Okay, great. So
So
let's go back to we're talking about spring, right? I connected with that right away when you said that, because you said we are like the flowers, like the animals. When it's winter, they're hibernating. When it's spring, they're waking up. So that is kind of how naturally the body in this environment also would adapt, so that I'm not feeling like I'm not doing something right when I feel one way in winter and I'm feeling different in the spring.
yeah,
And so I'm not committing to something that will not bode well for me in winter, because I know in winter we all feel this way. And then in spring, I can move that event to spring. That is very empowering right there. I really love that. So now
yeah,
we're moving to summer and then the fall, because I
yeah,
love the fall. Summer,
yeah.
yes, it's a bit busy, but I love the fall. I love the spring. Winter is just not okay. All right.
So summer is a time that we really want to bring more diversity of fruits and vegetables into our life. But also that's the time in traditional Chinese medicine, summer is all about the heart. It's the heart season. And the heart season is very much linked also with the lungs. They kind of go hand in hand, but it's the heart season. Spring in traditional Chinese medicine is liver, which is also why we want to focus on detoxing and all that kind of stuff. Is the cleansing season. That's why we call the spring cleaning. That's when everybody start cleaning their houses, getting rid of clothing that you don't want, furniture that you don't need anymore. You want to have a very, very fresh start at home. That's why a lot of people, that's the spring, right?
Mm.
And when it comes to summer, it's all about the heart. So one of the important aspects that come with the heart, it is that's the time that this is why we feel so much of going outside, going for hiking, for run, because that's what you're nurturing now when it comes to fitness. And and those are the things that you get in tune with. But also you want to bring more diversity of colors into your life when it comes to food, right? So you will see more fresh vegetables and fruits that will come in our case because we're in Alberta, so that they come from BC, because they already started their early season way before us. So by the time that we get their fruits and vegetables, they already have,
Mhm.
they started the warmer season for them, right? So now we start getting all these vegetables and fruits from BC. And that's when you
Mhm.
start seeing all this diversity that it's good for us. Because we're in Canada, we also really want to focus on a lot of the fruits and vegetables that are native from here. Not, I mean, as much as we love the tropical fruits, they're not from here. we really need to start being more in tune with what is natural from this country. And this is applicable to anybody, anywhere. You want to eat what is proper from that country, right? Like if you're close to the equator, you want to eat more tropical fruits because that's what is natural from that environment. And that is also what is going to help you be more in tune with the season. It's
Mm.
just eating more stuff that is natural from that season, from that place that you're living in that moment in time, aside from where we come from.
So
So
in Alberta, it will be strawberries,
yeah,
um,
strawberry, all
not
the
bananas.
berries.
Banana
It's
is a
tropical.
tropical fruit.
It,
Okay.
yeah, and
Pineapple
it
is a
comes,
tropical fruit.
yes, orange is a tropical fruit, banana, pineapple. As much as we love them, they're tropical. They're very high in glucose for us. So in countries like Canada, it's really hard for us to digest, right? But in tropical countries, because you're more active, you eat all those fruits, but you also burn it very quickly.
Mm.
And that's all about understanding, right? It goes with lifestyle. This is what I personally have to go through. Because the other thing I'm finding is that a lot of the research that is done when it comes to fitness and health is done in North America or Australia. Australia, there's some scientists that are in Australia, however, they all work in North America mostly. So even if we have people listening from different places of the world, that also make a big difference because it's like I don't know if you ever heard of the blue zone. The blue zone became very popular at some point, and the Mediterranean way of living and eating became very popular.
Mm-hmm.
But you and I are not in the Mediterranean country, so that lifestyle is not suitable for us, and vice versa. So a lot of the longevity and biohacking tricks are pretty much done in this part of the world because it's all research done in North America for what I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing, right? A lot of the people, I don't know if it's because, we're in Canada and then social media and internet, it's putting us in that funnel, right? Which we know it actually create a big influence when research is where we are. Uh, but I also see a lot of people from the Spanish speaking practitioners that are still following this kind of trend. And I don't really think it's fully valid for everywhere in the world. Right? That's kind of my thought in that. This is personal.
Okay.
And
So
so
veget.
then we go into the micro. So
Okay.
we have our seasons, but then now we gotta jump into, yes, we have 4 seasons in a year, but as women, we also have our 28-day cycle. So how
Okay.
are we
So
gonna
hold
start
on.
in?
Hold on, D. Hold on, D.
Okay.
We've not talked about the fall. So we've talked about winter, spring, summer. The spring is for the liver. The summer is for the heart and lungs. The fall is for.
Fall is long. So which is the reason why a lot of people get sick and the flu and the cold is that transition,
Oh.
right? Is that transition, is that preparation for winter. As spring is a preparation for summer, fall is a preparation for winter. And you're
Mm.
going to start seeing less of the vegetables and fruits, and that's when you're going to start transitioning. This is the time that you really want to work your lungs big time. So the heart season, which is summer, is in preparation for fall because heart and lungs, they work together. But then as good as you do over summer, right, you're preparing yourself for fall and making sure that your lungs are healthy. So now it's about breathing exercises, right? Which you should do
Mhm.
all, all every day, all season. There are many things that you can do all the time, of course, because they're good for you. But
Mhm.
but then this is the long season. which is why you really, really got to nurture that organ big, big time. And this is a time that if you have not been nurturing yourself enough, that's why a lot of people get the flu, get the cold, and all that kind of stuff. Is the transition and all those things during every season. So in traditional Chinese medicine, I'm not an expert into this, just so you know, but in the in between of every season, you always want to nurture the spleen, because in traditional Chinese medicine, the spleen is one of their main organs to support, because it's the one that filters the blood. And if your
Okay.
blood is not good, have no good quality, it will affect everything, because the nutrients travel through the oxygen in the blood.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
I'm honestly covering so much information for you guys that are listening. But you just take whatever you need and then you start with that, right? That's kind of what it comes
Yeah.
down to.
Yes, and I have a question about the spleen. But what organ is nurtured in the winter? Is it the kidney?
I think it's the kidneys. I have to look
Okay.
into that, but I think it's the kidneys, which the
Okay.
kidneys also go hand in hand with the adrenal glands,
Okay.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
then because you have the kidneys, you have the adrenals, and the adrenals are constantly being affected by
Mm-hmm.
stress, which is
Mm-hmm.
directly affecting the kidneys. So, and the kidneys represent your life force in traditional Chinese medicine, is that desire of living. That's why
Mm-hmm.
in winter time, you also want to support your kidneys big, big time,
Okay,
right?
great.
Because it's
How do
that
you take care
energy,
of
it's that emotion.
how do you take care of the spleen? The spleen
I
seems to be the
don't,
common factor for all of
yes,
them
I
since
don't know exactly how. That's not been my main focus over the years, which is the reason why I don't know much about it.
okay.
In conversations I had with my friends, right? They always talk about, always in the transition, always look at the spleen, but I never look into that specifically, because through my personal story and health challenges that I experience, I always have to work in a very specific things, right? Which is what it
Okay.
brought me to understand. I have a big view of what are the things that I need to look into and consider, because that's what I bring when it comes to fitness, right?
Okay. All right.
So that's
So
why I'm not fully aware of how we can do it.
okay. So now let's go to the micro level, and then we'll
So the
then take
micro level
the three
for
steps. We'll go to the
so the
micro
micro
level.
level, what is it? The micro level for us, it's going now into understanding the 28-day cycles that are no different than the 4 seasons, but just at the micro level. Because at the micro level, you have to look into the 28, 30-day cycle, same thing as your winter, your spring, your summer, and fall. Same way, but now we're bringing it into the 28-day cycle, right? So the same way I explained about the uh, the macro system, in the microsystem, we also need to take care of nurture over these different phases in our cycle that are aligned with our hormone cycles. So women post menopause, even though that they're not bleeding anymore, we all have cycles, whether we're bleeding or have period or not. And that's also a misunderstanding, because it's part of the cosmic law. It's cycles, it's rhythm, right? So it's just that it's different. It's just now we're jumping to a different rhythm for women that are post menopause,
Mhm.
right? But understanding that we are in a 20, 38, 30-day cycle, we start looking into the different phases. And then we jump into the first phase. So the first phase is that when we start bleeding, it's our first day of our period, and that's our first phase. So understanding that there are different hormones, and I'm not going to get too deep into that because that is also another conversation. But we're playing in a 28-day cycle, we're playing with different hormones: estrogen, cortisol, testosterone, insulin, and progesterone. These are the different hormones that we're playing at the micro level, right?
Mm.
And it's about understanding when and how we need to eat and how we can do intermittent fasting, how and when we need to do our workouts, right? When to make decisions. Because you mentioned that you get a lot of stuff done in winter, right? It's because you structure your days differently. But at the same time, we should, but we don't, because we live in a patriarchy society.
Mm.
We are not so much in tune with that. And we should make decisions, even for us women in business, mostly when our testosterone is at the higher level, which is in the middle of the cycle, is our second phase of the cycle. So we are exposed to constantly make decisions, but we also
Mm.
need to understand that not every day is the best day for us to make decisions.
Yeah.
And as
Mm.
we start being more in tune with that, you will start experiencing weight loss. This is at the macro level, micro weight loss, more energy, better sleep, developing more muscle mass, honing, better digestion, because we need to start being so as we go into the different phases, which is still 4 phases, the same way through the 28-day cycle, same as the environment, right? As we in that week, for example, that week before we get our period, for example,
That'll be the
that
fourth
is
phase.
that will be considered your winter, right? Before your period. That's when your body starts feeling like, oh my God, I just want to roll in bed, right? That's when you want to just maybe do the things that you really enjoy doing. Is that way before? How many of you really take the time to do that according to your cycle? We don't. That's a reality. Why? Because we're too busy. We don't have time for that shit, right? Is like taking time to do this. So if we look this into in perspective, is that we generally speaking work 5 days a week and take 2 days break. That is a
Mhm.
very patriarchy way of living. That is pretty much based on the male 24-hour cycle, which is why over all these years and centuries that women have been working so hard, becoming so independent, now we're feeling drained. We're feeling miserable. We'll feel out of tune because we have been living in a patriarchy world, in a patriarchy system that works for men and not for us. We have been adapting, don't get me wrong, we have been adapting to that, but it's not fully working for us, which is why women have been experiencing so many illnesses, disease, emotionally, drained. A lot of women are not feeling fully satisfied, right?
Hmm.
And so
That gives a lot
it's
of perspective there because, yeah, knowing that, because I mean, we had a talk recently during the International Women's Day, and the question that came up in my mind was really, is what we're fighting for equality? or
Yes.
just proper integration of what womanhood is like into the society. Because this, what you have said now, just makes it look like we've been going against the grain. We've been trying to adapt to something that is not fully productive for us. So being in a man's, calling it's a man's world is a lot more than just men ruling the world. It's also about women getting into what works for them per cycle at the micro and macro
Yeah.
level.
Yep. So
Yeah.
even as
Mic
women,
drop.
yeah, even as, woohoo! But the thing is, even that being said, women, us, we're still doing business as men. And because
Yeah.
the most of our business coaches are men, a lot of the training that we get in business about how to run a business, it's even coming from men. There are more women coming out, don't get me wrong, right? There are more women getting in tune with how we should run our businesses now. But the history, the same thing as fitness, same thing as nutrition, same thing as business, is all coming from men. And the good
I
thing
mean,
is it's changing, but here's the problem. What happens with change is we go to the opposite end. We go into the extreme. And we're in that extreme, and now we need to find balance,
mm,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
we're still finding ourselves, how we're fitting in, right?
Yeah.
So, which
Sounds
is
good.
when we start understanding our cycles, we will be able to run our businesses better. Because then we'll know, because as a business owner, we have more control of when to make decisions, when to take time off, and how to basically align your schedule according to your cycle. Unfortunately, for women that have a job, not so much, right? But you can
Mm-hmm.
still play with it. You can still get to know yourself and give yourself the opportunity to say, can I get back to you tomorrow if you have a full-time job, right? Because according to your cycle, you're not in the best day to make decisions.
Mm,
So you give yourself that time, right? For somebody that is an employee to say, okay, you know what? I'm not in the best time to make decisions. And then it takes a lot of being in tune with yourself. So like this is the thing, right? It takes time because we're going against the current. So we really need to come back in, tune up, get the tune with the same but best radio station that works for our hormones. Then we're gonna start. So it takes time. That's why I work with my clients for at least a year because it's a tune out, tune. Is this the right frequency, radio frequency for me, right? And then you
mm,
start looking into that. So then we
mm.
get into, so we get in a cycle, so we need to be in tune. So let's go back to as business owners, for example, even employees. If we were in the perfect world designed for us women and our cycles, we should work 3 weeks and take 1 week off. And that week off is a week before a period. It's a preparation, it's a nurturing, is that I just want to cuddle. I want my husband or my boyfriend or my kids or my friends. I want to hang out with my girlfriends. I have to have, stupid conversations, lots of laughs, all that kind of stuff. That is a week before that, right? Because you don't want to aggravate or stress your cortisol levels
Mm.
because that is what it creates a stress and it creates this harmony in your hormones. There is a time in our cycle that we're better at uh, facing stressful situations.
Yeah.
We're
Mm.
better at even response to traumatic events.
Yes.
We can't
Yes.
control life, right? Because events happen. But one thing that is very interesting about our cycle, and I just discovered that a few months ago, is that when us women go through a traumatic event, one of the questions that we should be asked is which phase in our cycle we were. Because depends on the phase on the cycle that we were more prepared to face that event and it will affect us differently. And I was like, what the heck? That was a new discovery for me,
Mm,
like a
mm.
few months ago. It's like, whoa. So, um,
So
it,
knowing that, so knowing, oh, for instance, knowing when that traumatic event happened, right, would now inform what kind of help you might need
because
or
it
how you bounce
has
back.
affected you. Yeah, yes, because
Mm,
in the face of your, which is why it's so important tracking. Because my period personally, it's always been on point. I never track my cycles. I intuitively knew which part of my cycle I was. But since I'm doing this work now more seriously with all of you ladies, right? I have been on a mission for myself as well to track myself and start because I'm not the kind of person that is going to teach something without trying it myself.
mm,
So what I understanding how I can track my own cycle and the most efficient way to track that, that's how I can explain to you ladies how,
mm.
different ways to do it.
Definitely the conversation is going to take different parts. Like while you spoke about this, I remembered one event that happened smack in the middle of summer, and I'd gained some momentum right then in what I wanted to do. What I remember is that everything came crashing, and I wasn't able to go forward with that thing until now.
Mm-hmm.
It affected my creativity. That's really where it is for me. Creativity and stress levels. That's when some of these things show up. And I so connect with this that you're saying. But I never had
Yeah,
this kind of awareness. So everybody listening
yeah,
here, please take your
yeah.
track and
So, and I want
my
to
God.
also mention because you're bringing this up. So that's the time that you stop working with me. Because what happens is that's what we all do. In moments like that, we
No, no,
retract.
no, no, no. No, 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 no. It was in the middle as well.
It
It
was in
was
the middle.
well, yeah, it was in the middle, but I knew that winter was coming, and it wasn't the time I was going to do that. It was going to take a lot of struggle for me to do what I wanted to do right in the summer. You get what I
Yeah,
mean? So for me, I just like, okay, winter is always like this for me anyway. So I didn't bother because I was going to have to do more, right? But right there and then, the momentum I had, I was going to use less time because I was at the peak of my creativity right then, and then so for me it's also about protecting protecting yourself, right? Being resilient. When such things happen to you, they shouldn't take you down and out. Now I was in the middle of walking through a health situation with you, and so that took me like off guard, and so my recovery time was quite a bit. Oh yeah, so it was. I'm glad it was at the middle of that, because then, and I would come some mornings and I would look like, I hope D would not put me, like, I would like to talk you out of it. It's like, no, every time we meet, you have to work out and you take me on that, so it helped me build that resilience right out of it. So I didn't bother going into that, because then things just didn't work out anymore to go back there. But as I speak with you now, I'm building momentum. Spring is here. My body
yes.
is preparing for that already, and it's saying, where are the old files, right?
Mhm,
Let's dig them
mhm.
up. And this is so exciting what you tell me.
Yeah.
So the
So,
first phase, okay, go on, please.
yeah, and I also want to remind people that even it's about everything they have rhythms and cycles, everything. And even our businesses are itself as well, if you look at it, right? But the question
Mm,
is how that cycle and rhythm of your business can be aligned with your own personal cycle. But
cycle.
you need to
Mm,
understand yourself first in order to, because it's not as aligning to the business, is aligning the business to what we can do best in our best time. And that's when
Yes.
our business is going to be successful.
Mm. Okay, so we're going to just put a tape on that, a bow on that for now, because we're going to explore that in a different. I probably will come with entrepreneurs and we have that conversation because we need to know. And we've not really gone so much into the exercise part of things, the workouts and all, because there were some things I learned from you. Like, I know that this helps. You told me, Bukola, you can actually do 5 push-ups. When you're in the store, when you're at home, anywhere you're at, this is how you do the plank and the push-up. I mean, I'm like, if I had been doing push-ups all my life, I've been doing push-ups wrong all my life, so we'll still go into exercise. That'll be another topic. I want us to wrap this up by on the food side of things, the nutrition, because we've talked a lot about that, eating in the season, eating for a cycle, eating for environment. We've talked about how that affects our culture. We've not really talked about eating during our cycle, but of course, when we take the things from you've said about the seasons, right, we can actually put that in and know that before our periods is when we eat the nurturing foods,
Yeah.
and that. I know there's a
So
lot to go on there. Mm.
one thing I want to give everybody a good understanding is intermittent fasting has become very, very trendy. And I will tell you all ladies listening to this, stop doing intermittent fasting like men. We need to understand our cycles, and then according to our cycles, we align intermittent fasting because you want to work with your hormones. And I understand, and I'm not arguing the fact that a lot of you have experienced incredible benefits with intermittent fasting 5 days a week, 7 or 6 days a week on regular basis. I'm not going to argue, and then you see results with that. I'm not going to argue that you get to see results when you just go full on carnivore. I'm not going to argue that because you got results. What I will argue is, what about the long term? Those are the short term results, right? That you're experiencing with intermittent fasting and with a carnivore diet. I want you to look into when I say earlier, I'm the grandmother. What is the grandmother I want to be? This is what I want you to think is the long-term vision, right? Is this way of doing intermittent fasting like men is serving my hormones? Is a carnivore diet like 7 days a week for months and months and months? It's serving my hormones. It's serving weight loss. It's serving like mental clarity, because they're the common things that everybody experience when they go and do those things. But I want you to think the long term. I want you to think about harmonizing your hormones, balancing your hormones. I want you to really, really age with ease and grace and in tune, not just because some dude it's been doing intermittent fasting and works for them and longevity and biohacking. All the freaking biohackers are men. All the biohackers that we know that are very famous are men. There are more women coming out, doing more research and claiming we need scientists to do more research in women, which is a good thing because there's a lot of women that are like doctors, especially, that are asking, we need more research done in women. We need to understand how all these trendy things are really influencing us in the long term, the grandmother days, right? So
Mm.
those are things to like um one of the things that I am working on is to start a 12-week program for that reason, because it's about having that understanding, right, of the cycles, working all together. And I'm going to touch into community, which I didn't talk much about that. But one of the things,
But before
yeah,
we go into community, let's wrap this nutrition part up. Could you tell us three things that we need to think about when we are looking at when well, you've talked about some of those things, like just summing it up and giving context to women over 40, like when it comes to feeding. So in summary, when it comes to food and nutrition, you should think about these three things. Just a summary, because I know you've talked about that, and then we'll go to the community. Yeah.
so women, so as women in our 40s, we're in preparation. We need to prepare ourselves to what menopause, it's coming. In the next 10, 20 years, who knows? I don't really know. Everybody's different that way. So really, number one, you really, really need to track your your period, because we need to basically dissect those 4 phases of your cycle. So track that, because it's really hard for me to give you a recipe without knowing your cycle. Because that based on your cycle, that's how we can determine what you will be eating on each phase, what workouts you're gonna do on each phase, and how you're gonna do intermittent fasting on each phase. Okay? Because even water fasting, a 24-hour to 72-hour water fast, it must be done in a specific phase in our cycle. The easiest one that I can tell you that it's pretty easy to identify, right, is that if we look at the 10 days before your period, don't
Mm-hmm.
do any fasting. Okay? That's when you want to eat nurturing food, like your root vegetables, your carbohydrates, because you need that energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to eat your bone broth, very, very nurturing food those days before your period. And as because there's some counting that is required. So I'm gonna give you the easiest to identify without knowing much about it. So then as your first day of your period starts, then that's when you want to start doing intermittent fasting of at least 15 hours a day. So then your eating window is 7, right? So then you're eating in 7-hour window, and you do that for the following, if I remember correctly, for the following 10 days, right? So I'm already giving you 20, like those days before your period and after your period. And then you just do fasting for at least 15, no more than that. If you do more hours of intermittent fasting than that, then you're putting your cortisol in a stress, which can also affect your adrenals, which can also affect your kidneys. This is a whole chain of events, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to make sure that your cortisol levels are, you know, a level, so it can help you to manage life in general, which is full of stress. So those are things that to consider. This is also
Yeah.
the time that your workouts are, the exertion is medium. Before your period, you don't want to work out. So those 8, 10 days before your period, you don't want to work out. You just want to relax, because you're taking 3 weeks of serious exercise. It's no different than how we should experience work. You work out, you work for 3 days, you take 1 week off. So workouts are the same. You work out for 3 weeks, and then you take a week off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're
Mm-hmm.
very, and the intensity changes over the 3 weeks as well, because we want to use our hormones for weight loss and muscle building properly.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things to consider, okay? Because then after that, we jump into the decision making, doing very, very strong workouts, right? That's the time that you're gonna eat a lot of carbs, because you're exerting a lot of energy. So the carbs, I want to share that because I believe it's important, is
You cut off a bit there. Can you say that again? You cut off a bit.
so during after those the first period, the first phase of your cycle, then we jump into where we have that peak of testosterone. That's when you work out super hard, and that's when you really want to eat a lot of carbs because you need that energy. And having a very, very clear understanding, protein is not your source of energy. Have this clear because we are getting into this trend that everybody's afraid of carbs, and then we're not eating carbs, right? And then you're working out a lot, so you're basically putting your body in a lot of stress.
Mm.
So protein, it is the very, 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 very last source of energy. The purpose of protein is to repair and regenerate your tissues. That's their job. For energy, we're looking at carbs and fats. There's a lot to it, of course, and carbs are not just rice, potato, right? Which is another misunderstanding from many, many people out there. Carbs are divided into complex and simple carbs, but then we put them all in one. So your vegetables and your fruits and your legumes are also considered carbs, and they are your main source of energy, not protein. If there's something that you can get from this conversation when it comes to nutrition, I would say that do not consider protein your first source of energy. That's I'm
Great.
closing that chapter.
Okay, so this you do when you work with women one-on-one. So tell us about that and how we can reach you, right? So that women can connect with you. Ladies, if you're listening to this, it's a lot, but I can tell you that
Yeah,
it works. You know, even to knowing the vitamins that you need to show up on, you know, and how you need to eat for yourself. It's a lot you have to like work one-on-one with Dee. So Dee, tell us how um, people can connect with you and get on this.
yeah. So I am on all social media. You can find me as Mago. You can also find me under the Wellness Hub YYC. And I'm on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I am on LinkedIn. Um, I can easily do a 30 minutes. Sometimes we take an hour just talking and having a conversation on whether we are a good match or not. What my main focus always is to help women to create this lifestyle that works for you. I want all of you to feel confident and sexy because that is what is going to show up. Oh, yeah, right? Because that is what is going to change your energy. When you really and feeling sexy and confident is the result of you knowing that you're doing all the right things and your body is taking care of what it needs to take care of because you're doing the right things. And that is what is going to show up in confidence, in shaping your body, in having more clarity, hormone balance, better sleep. These are all the things that happen, right? Unfortunately, a lot of us women are experiencing many, many challenges. And for that, we need to create a strategy, right? To be able to create that ultimate lifestyle that is going to serve you, and then you can go on your own, right?
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
so those are things to consider. So find me on
All
social
right.
media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, under the Wellness Hub YYC. Let's have a conversation. I don't really think
Yes,
there's,
please.
yeah, it is very,
Go
very simple.
You've heard that, ladies. Go to the wellnesshub.com and book a consultation. First 30 minutes will get you hooked, I promise you. Thank you, Dee, for today. We have talked about nutrition mainly. Like I remember when we started this conversation, we thought all of this would be in one session, but take this as an invitation to come next time and the next time because we still want to look at fitness, want to look at life over 40 generally and just focus there. We also want to look at entrepreneurial women, right? And how we can, begin to adapt ourselves in this world that is built for men, right? That is a whole different conversation that requires a lot of awareness and in building intuition, education, learning capacity building in those areas. So I'd love for you to really come back again. So thank you. And with this, we'll come to the end of this first session, optimizing your health. Mastering, let me just take that topic. um on optimizing your health for a good lifestyle. Anyway, D, at the Braggle, we use the word live sexy as one of our mantra. Live sexy, and sexy is an acronym that says superbly S, express E, and extraordinary U.
Mhm.
That's what we call sexy. So it's not so much about what you put on. Yes, we do the lingerie. Let the lingerie be the icing on the cake, but
Mhm.
let the cake be the real deal, and
Yeah.
so that is what that is. So I'm glad that we were able to do this and we'll do this again and again. I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Because I also want at some point is have a conversation on how important wearing the perfect bra it is for exercise.
Oh yes. Oh
We
yes.
need to have that conversation.
That would be under fitness. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that would be very interesting. I have a lot of good stories right there. Okay. So thanks for this. And yes, see you next time. I really appreciate your time today, Dee. Thank you. Yeah.